right. Eid al-Fitr, we continue to celebrate with our Muslim brothers. Today is a big day. And of course, we thank them for that salutary effort they've put forward, observing the holy month of Ramadan, and also praying for this country, doing good as they've been doing as well. We stand in solidarity with our Muslim brothers. In the editorial cartoons today, we have in the Standard this particular publication that GAMS has drawn for us. There's a cost of living and the cost of being Kenyan. On one end, you can see how Wanjiku there is saddled with this big, heavy burden of food, health, shelter, and education as it stands. And I'm telling you, even that hustler fund has become, you know, when we're going to the digital in the e-citizen now, we're being taxed. For you to have a birth certificate, that also amount has gone up. For marriage certificate, you might want to think twice as well, because also that fee has gone up a bit. Land search, they were increasing that particular rate by 100% last time we saw it, and we had from the CS as well. Driver's license as well, that has gone up. We have the corporation tax as well going up. And as we see, even the benefits right now, according to today's publication, that will be affecting you as well. This is the cost of living and the cost of being a Kenyan. You're torn in between. Which one do you choose? Neither of that. Professor Mene says, why do you say neither?
They are all burdens.
They're all burdens.
But although we do have two layers in the country, there is everybody else and the hustler grandees.
And the hustler grandees.
The hustler grandees are enjoying. Because one, they don't pay for these things, they are paid for. Their houses, their whatever, their transport, their allowances. So the other day there was this a news item. They are going to increase the income of the top guys by 14%. The president and company. The rest are having problems having any salary. You know, so you wonder, where is this money coming from? If there's that money to do that, for the few, the grandees, and then you cannot even pay doctors and the teachers. The other day, Kenyans was talking about being a pecuniary embarrassment.
Pecuniary embarrassment.
So you have, there is a disconnect somewhere.
Indeed.
And that disconnect is at the top. It's policy problem. The country has succumbed to IMF dictates in such a way that nothing is making sense. And that's why you have these kind of things going on. You ask people what's going on, they don't know.
Right, so, but we have also the US raising a special umbrage with the taxes that Kenyans are being paid, that we are highly taxed. So are they also speaking from both sides of the mouth when it comes to what IMF or the Bretton Woods institution is doing as well?
Well, you know, every country is dealing with this issue of tax and value. And as you are aware, some of the happiest countries in the world are Scandinavia. I've traveled there many times, very extensively. They're paying heavy tax in Scandinavia, but the tax is being utilized in the right way that bring value of people. So people are willing to pay tax, but the issue is when Wanjiku is not getting that benefit.
All right. I need to check your mic. I think it's one which is crackling. I'll look into it, then we... But let's move forward and see also what we do have there. Wasaliti. And this is... I want Peter Kagwanja to comment on this as well. Wasaliti, as you can see, Wasaliti, that is a cross there. Lately, we've heard from the former president that he's been, of course, what do we say, betrayed. And you can see Murada there. Murada, actually, you can see, is donning a cross. He's a clergy. Did he become a clergy? And people now who have betrayed Uhuru Kenyatta, well, they can see from the depiction of us on, this is how it looks, especially with the Jubilee Party. And we've had Murathe, who has come out saying that Uhuru was not really talking about this pact that we have between President William Ruto and Raila Odinga as far as AU Commission is concerned. But you can talk about Wasaliti. The president has been in the back burner for the longest time, but he's still carrying out the same sentiment that he had previously as president of being betrayed. So people are wondering, we thought maybe he's trying to reflect. He's seen some of the ails that bedeviled his government, and maybe he will come up with a different narrative. So is it the same broken old record that we stepping off his tongue?
I think the concept of Musariti is integral to our politics for many years now. People remember the Kenyatta succession in 1978. And one of the key architects of the Kenyatta succession as it unfolded was one Charles Mugane Njojo. And to the best of our knowledge, he belonged to a camp that basically supported Moi's accession to power and opposed the continuity of the Kiabu Mafia, as they were called those days, who were agitating for constitutional change so that they can block Moi from becoming power. But within 2 years, by 1983, we are talking about Musaliti, and that's how the concept of Musaliti enters into a political lexicon. And you begin to see the political elite fragmenting. The result was a huge amount of money that was spent on the trials, the Jojo trial. And for me, I'm sure I have a number of lawyer friends who just became lawyers because they used to buy a paper every day to read the proceedings of the traitor. I was in Form 5, I remember that time, at Kangaroo High School. So we used to literally send out for a paper so that we can sit. And over tea, after break, we would sit down, and one of them, I remember David D. was also one of the members of those who were surrounding that Musariti, in terms of the reading. So it was a very good culture of reading. Now, fast forward with Uhuru Kenyatta, he brings up the concept of Musariti. But in his context, the streets for Moi, Musariti was the one who betrayed him when he's in power. And they belong to the same camp. But in 2023, 2024, the Musariti concept is not fitting in well. Mm-hmm. It is not fitting in well because there was nothing about Uhuru Kenyatta to be betrayed, because he was leaving power anyway. By August, 10th, he had lost power, because not to anybody, but to the Constitution, because is required to basically resign. So what does it tell you? That the narrative of Azimio was a narrative of self-succession. And you have come across the concept of self-succession. In other words, you want to leave power, but you still want to control power after you have left power. And that was obnoxious to the spirit, the letter and spirit of the Constitution. Because the Constitution expect a smooth transfer from the presidency to the post-president. I have made this point before. And the post-presidency is an institution, just like we have the president. It is an institution in this republic. You can compare it with what we have in Tanzania, that the retired presidents, like Jakaya Kikwete, are the custodians of order. If the sitting president and his discontents disagree, they don't derail the country because there's somebody who can be called upon. And we saw this in action in America, when George Bush and Al Gore were on each other's neck, and the country was teetering on the brink. So what happened? They called, these elders, the Clintons, and all those who were leaders before, to sit down from all sides of the political divide. And they sat down and brought the country to order. So Uhuru Kenyatta has a very, very, very serious job, which he's not doing, but he's doing the opposite job. His main job is to become the moral custodian of this society. As a neutral, impartial, and retired leader, he has a higher pedestal than William Ruto and Raila Odinga. And when they start squabbling of the country, it's only Uhuru Kenyatta who can come up and tell them, ladies and gentlemen, here we are not doing the right thing. This is what it is, and they will listen to him.
So when you talk about higher pedestal, you mean it in terms of statesmanship?
Yes, it's more. That is why in the United States, the moment you've become a president, no, even before you retire, if you just you're sworn in as president, you become a statesman. This is where the concept of, a statesman comes from. Every retired president in the United States is a statesman. In other words, you belong to the state. And statesmanship requires that you protect the very institution that made you a statesman. And therefore, what we have not seen here is a break with the past. And to accept that when we have these people as statesmen, had Moi, let's say, and old Kenyatta been arrived, and then we would not have had 2008, 2007, 2008, because they would have talked to us from their moral high ground. So there is an institution which we have refused to implement in our constitution called the post-presidency. And the post-presidency is the same post-presidency you found with the Mandela. And globally, it translates to the Council of Elders. The, president of the United States, Jimmy Carter, Nelson Mandela, the current Antonio Guterres, retired prime minister, and a number of other leaders from across the world who formed together and called the world to order when you don't have other avenues or offices. So now to start, jumping to the mud of politics, of traitors, for Uhuru Kenyatta, I thought that was really below him. I know the traitor he's referring to is Raila Odinga, but Raila Odinga has never been a conformist of any leader, if you do your history lessons very well.
But Murade has said that is not the case.
There is nothing else, because Ruto rebelled against Raila, Uhuru long time ago, and went and declared himself, and he was himself called Tanga Tanga. That's it. And it is the Tanga Tanga movement that has now swept into power.
Thank you.
So you can only be misreading history. The traitor is Raila Odinga, because they were supposed to be in the Azimio together. Uhuru is the chair of Azimio, and Raila is the active politician for Azimio. So let's rather not try to confuse us, because there is a logic to life. It's not about how many how many cups of tea I've had. There's a logic to life.
All right. I don't want to belabor the point. That is not the point of discussion, but I can see you have a point. Just briefly.
Just briefly, Prof. What Professor Kawanja is saying is more of the political ideal, where retired presidents are impartial and they are able to steer the country and be the conscience of the nation. Prof, that's the ideal. But the Kenyan situation historically speaks of something else. Ours, and I like the book by Joe Hamisi, Politics of Betrayal. Is our politics just full of betrayal? If you look at from the 60s to the 70s, and much more recently, we saw Kibaki and Raila, Kibaki betraying Raila, and the Moi betrayed Saitoti and all that, and supported other people. So that is an innate, if you ask me, characteristics of our politics. Even in the U.S., retired presidents are actually not immune to sectional politics. In the last election, we saw Obama coming out to campaign for Joe Biden. Where is the neutrality? That is a Democrat par excellence. So the ideal that we could wish to see is, a neutral person, retired, and ready to be the conscience of the nation.
Right.
Yeah. I think we have had two former presidents who did very well, Moi and Kibaki. They were former president and they behaved very well. They stayed out. Uhuru has had a problem staying out. Partly because Atwoli told him that he was young. Therefore, he should go nowhere.
Is that what it is?
There is a connection there. Now, this, as Peter was talking about this, the Msaliti thing is a different ballgame this time.
Yeah.
In 1982, after the coup, and then we have the Moi needed to dump Jonjo in one way or another. So as you were talking about how they were reading the newspaper also, they were just reading. And a lot of strange things came out, How the deal that might have been cut between Raila and Moi in the whole thing, and why Raila said he was conducting a coup is to stop Njonjo from having a coup. So, and that night, the police commissioner was jobless after that. So you say, what's going on here? Something is not making sense. So the same thing here, something is not making sense, because what you have complaining is those people who disagreed with Uhuru in 2022 for their own interest, or whatever it is. They disagreed with him, and they went to the Ruto camp. And among the latest to move on is what is Raila. I think that's what Peter is saying here. Because Raila once has been promised a job at the AU. Whether he gets it or not is another matter. But it's been promised. So for some people, that sounds as if, why are you not with us? Azimio as a political coalition is disintegrating. The same thing with Kenya Kwanza. They're all disintegrating because there is no longevity in them. And so there is a lot of jittery around. And if there is a lot of jittery, you can see a lot of games being played. The fact that the country is not doing well is fodder for political maneuvers. And there are a lot of people who are dreaming now, where is my chance? The country is not doing well. President Ruto is in trouble politically and in the long term. So maybe some other people can be groomed to, and I think Uhuru may be in the process of trying to prop up some other people. So all those come into play, and we can see some of these things, accusations and counter-accusations, which are okay.
All right, let's hear from Manoa Midamba, then we turn the crack now to Global News.
Val, I think we can sit around this table and debate the issue, but for me, it's much deeper than that. The question that we need to raise is what kind of image do we need in Africa? And secondly, what are the substance of that image? Because America has certain image, the UK has certain image, Chinese have certain image, which they have created, and then they have the substance to fill it. And so we can theorize that Uhuru, name names. I'm not sure that's the right statement when we make names. The people Uhuru is mad at, and why is he mad? We cannot get into the inner thinking of President Uhuru. The question which we need is we need a substantive council of elders, which goes beyond what we call the tribal elders that we have here, in order to calm African politics. Obasanjo is doing a marvelous job. I wish Nelson Mandela was alive. And Uhuru did certain things, particularly in foreign policy, before he left, which propelled him toward being part of that. So these are the people that can help in the conflictual situation which we have right now in DRC Congo, DRC, Sudan, Somalia. They have a role. They have a role to play. But how do we treat these people? How do we treat ex-president? How do we explain the kind of carnage that went into treating the Kenyatta family recently. We did well with Moi. Irrespective, Moi was not a perfect person. Moi did awful things as a president. But the image that Kenya put together, and we were at the studio, or the ball, if you can remember, he was buried as a honorable ex-president with all the honors that this country can provide. This is what creates sustainability for our politics, for our system, for our country. And to what extent Kenya is building toward that.
Thank you.
Is very important.
Right, thank you. Well, we need to wind up our
but
I can see you have something very
yes,
brief.
it's very, very important to underline this, that it is true what Dr. Bongi is saying, that our politics is characterized historically with betrayal. Whether you're talking about the Mau Mau, they say they were betrayed. Whether you're talking about Odinga, not yet Uhuru, that book is basically a narrative of betrayal. Bildad Kagia, The Roots of Freedom, that book is also about betrayal. And you can, and the theme of betrayal is part of it. And that's not, it's not a surprise there for our literary giant, Francis Ibuga. Wrote about betrayal in the city. Yeah, which is a text that we read, that we read as students throughout our time. But that's not the point we're making here with Uhuru Kenyatta and Daniel Moi. Because at a certain point, Kenyans sat down and came up with an act of parliament, defining how you should be like as a retired president, and give privileges. We created an office that is paid for by the exchequer. And that office, and you have no choice to take or to leave. It is a mandatory that you take your dues after you retire, unless you didn't retire. And therefore, there is a responsibility that is required from this office. And as a political scientist, and one who was one of the people who were intellectual architect of this constitution, because the constitution went under Kibaki, and remember, this is the month that President Kibaki passed on, and therefore we are also remembering him. And among the things we should remember him for is how he envisaged the stability of this country, because he was one of the leaders who faced the threat of a country disintegrating in his hand, and therefore he had to think hard and fast. And when he thought, the idea of a post-presidency was discussed. I'm talking when I know Professor Kibuda Kibwana is listening. The late Jiro and Kamodo Waiganjo and others. In our debates during that discussion, it is all about how do we ensure that this kind of thing that happened in 2008 does not happen. And among the institutions that we thought would help us in this is to empower the retired presidents, and we envisage we are going to have many, because Ruto is going to be an ex-president when Uhuru is still alive, because we are playing for his long life. We are going to get a third one, so it's possible that we'll have 3 retired presidents in this country. Now, if all the 3 retired presidents behave the way Uhuru Kenyatta is behaving, then the country will be anarchic. Because they will be in the office and they will be sponsoring cronies and talking about betrayals. And where will the country be? So now he's alone, because Moi is gone, Kibaki is gone, now he's alone. But if they're all there and both are talking about their cronies, what would be the state of the nation? So the point is, we need to implement this spirit of the post-presidency and stop politicking.
Indeed, and I think we'll come to that when we're focusing on AU.
Yes.
And there was that summit of the elders, right? That they were proposing that we should be having the former president now as a council of elders, right? Yeah. So that will be also a good retiring point for the presidents as well, so that we can also take a good use and make them resourceful as far as matters of statesmanship is concerned, and also leadership and integrity around the region, with the niggling worry of wars breaking out. And talking of wars, we want to go to Rwanda, where we know that they are celebrating this week the Kwibuka. And Rwanda's President Paul Kagame has said he is concerned over the failure of the United States to characterize his country's 1994 massacre as a genocide against the country's minority Tutsi people. While speaking during a televised news conference in the capital, Kigali, on Monday, Kagame said the issue was part of the discussion during his talks with former US President Bill Clinton, who led a delegation to a ceremony on Sunday to commemorate the 30th anniversary of genocide. He said, quote unquote, Rwanda will never understand why any country will remain intentionally vague about who was targeted in the genocide. I don't understand that. Such ambiguity is in fact a form of denial, which is a crime. Let's just listen in.
And feel free also to tell us whatever you don't like about us. But our ask is one. When it is the day of commemoration, which is 7th of April, can you be kind enough to commemorate with us and stop there? And there are 365 days in a year. Give us that day of 7th of April, commemorate with us, and then you can have the rest 364 days blaming us every day for everything you don't like about us. Just separate these two things.
And that's, of course, the sentiment of the president. The United States has not identified what really happened or characterized what happened in 1994 as genocide. And this is also the publication during this week. The East African is holding Rwanda, Kwibuka, what are we saying, as it marks the 30th anniversary of the 1994 genocide against the Tutsis. It's remarkable just how much Rwanda has not only survived but thrives and is reaching for more. Let's just begin from there, Professor Macharia Munene. What do you think about his sentiment? That
I think they are good sentiments. We should be given that. And I think he's raising issues of narratives and expectations. It's good that President Clinton was there. And we give Clinton credit. He did go to Rwanda and he did apologize at one time that they did not do enough. That one we give. But I think what President Kagame is talking about is not Clinton being there, but the general attitude of the West.
Not even a general attitude, just they've not even mentioned the word genocide.
That's what I'm coming to.
Okay.
The general attitude, when it comes to other people, they are careful, they don't want to admit that there is genocide. And because to admit there is genocide means obligations to do something. And they don't want to do anything about it. So that part of it, they have not apologized. That you failed to admit there was genocide, and even the message that was sent by Anthony Blinken. And I think Kagame was responding to that message, not to Clinton being there. The message was kind of shallow. And so he was saying, you at least accept something that you did. I mean, not you did something. You ignored a genocide. And at least don't remind us that you failed, because they did fail. At the time, the United Nations, the person who was in charge, was he? Kofi Annan. He was the one in charge of in 1994. And he did nothing to the whole thing. The whole conceptual West is complicit in the whole thing. So he was reminded, before you condemn us for this and this and this, because there have been a lot of criticism on Rwanda, especially Kagame himself, and the way he governs the country. So he's responding to all those things. But I thought it was very clever of him. At least give us one day when you can condemn us for the rest.
For the 364 days remaining in a year.
It was very smart of him in that sense. But I think the message was driven home, and whoever has ears hears. And of course, he's not an angel, that we know, and nobody is an angel. So that would be my reaction. I think he's addressing a phenomenon, and he's really putting pressure on the West. Please admit when something is wrong, it's wrong. Like the genocide in Gaza. Mm-hmm. They don't want to admit that, and they have a problem. Mm-hmm. And it's not just a question of Rwanda, it's a phenomenon. When they were killing people in the colonial days, did they ever admit that they were doing it's a genocide? Where they were wiping out people? There is a pattern of reluctance to call things as they are. Mm-hmm. And I think Kagame is calling on this, says, please, stop playing games.
So what does a discernible difference will it make if we call it genocide? Or the US term what really happened as genocide? Noah Midamba.
Dubal Munene is right. But the question is, what is the value of an African child? What is the value of African people? What's the value of Palestinian compared to a Jewish person who is done? And so you need to go back to the historical structural changes and control system that govern the world and where we are. And then you are looking at a situation where the South, so-called, the developing countries are coming up and raising issues. And Kagame, there are people who are calling for Kagame to step down. You've done your work, you need to step down. But they're not understanding the challenges and the issues that Kagame is trying to deal with. And that sentiment is reflected by Rwandese people. We don't want to go back to where we come from. When that time comes, you will not be here with us. So the issue is calling for, and Bill Clinton honestly was right, because I remember very clearly, Bill said this was one of the things he regretted in his presidency. You know, not many leaders will come up and accept that. But the issue, are you practicing? If it happens right now again in DRC, genocide, if we see it again, are you going to call it? We're seeing it in Palestine. So the truth, what is the truth? You know, what do we have in front of us? And how do we address this issue from going forward? These are the questions and the issues that Kagame is calling.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah, Deepa, you know, narratives is a concept we grapple with in history, Prof. Because who we are, either as a community or as a people, is a product of social constructs, what we are calling narratives. And the social constructs that go to inform our identities and how the world sees us is a product of historical processes. That is really why the questions that President Paul Kagame is asking are very, 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 very critical. For example, the way the African is constructed by the conceptual West is what determines their actions for or against us. So it's important, Dibal, what we know about you and how we understand you, because that determines what we do to you. So what Kagame is asking is actually very, very critical. But and human life, regardless of who, whether it's of a Palestinian or an Israeli or a Rwandese or a Hutu or a Tutsi or of Kenneth Ombongi, is not negotiable. It is holy, it is sacrosanct, and all those things. But I find it interesting about the timing of President Kagame's complaint, Prof. In my very considered opinion, President Kagame has reached that stage of an African strongman. And there are very clear characteristics of African strongman men if you look through history. Normally, they have this strong backlash against their former colonial supporters. Up to very recently, President Kagame was a darling of the West, getting funding from different institutions, and he was being touted as one of the shining examples of Africa. When they turn against you, then you start complaining. The second one, African strongmen, regardless whether you're talking about President Mugabe in Zimbabwe or our own President Moi in Kenya, they always fight these enemies, either real or imagined. They are always against something. And finally, there could be more. They cling to power, create a scenario where they think the country will not be without them. Literally, what Louis XVI of France called the Tassamoa. I'm the state and the state is me. That is the stage where President Kagame is, and it is determining the kind of attitude and the kind of things that he is saying right now. And finally, we actually, I could be wrong on this, but we don't expect the United States to come out and say a few things about the Rwandese genocide, because that over 1 million people will be killed in 100 days. It was an indictment to the only standing superpower at the time. If you read President Clinton's autobiography, I've read it once or twice, he actually regrets about the turn of events in Rwanda. But then at the time, Rwanda was a tiny, insignificant international player. The American geopolitics continent had nothing very relevant in Rwanda. If it was Kenya, then it could have been a totally different case. So there is a way in which America neglected the situation in Rwanda when everybody expected, as the only big boy existing, they could have intervened.
Right.
So they will not accept the indictment.
Right.
So I don't foresee them calling it genocide tomorrow.
Okay.
I think we need to call this issue out clearly, that there's double standards here. And double standards are coming as a result of what you'd call, Western patronage, that view of that Africa is not important, and that the death of an African is not important. Now, and it's coming against a background of hundreds of years of dehumanization of the African race, which is very, very well documented. And no limits. The other day here, we were talking about when they were burying the tooth of Patrice Lumumba. We were on this forum again. And we went over this issue of how the West is now rediscovering its past and beginning to admit that we committed serious genocidal issues here. Namibia is one of Africa's stablest and wealthiest countries, but with very little population. Why? Because the Germans committed the Herero genocide. Literally waking up in the morning and wiping out a certain people almost out of the face of the earth. The same drive that forced the Nazis to literally rise up against the Jews and wipe them out. That the issue was not about whether we are wiping them out or not. It was how fast we do it. And they called upon their technological prowess to basically commit the Holocaust. So they even, went to gas. How can we kill them fast? And how can we also make them disappear, that way? So the question of genocide in the West is part of the history. The Maji-Maji, so-called Maji-Maji rebellion was basically, a genocide against Tanzanians, the Hehes, the Gogos and the others from that particular country. And here, we had a near genocide situation against the Mau Mau. Because when the British started throwing bombs from the air to villages and sending people like Idi Amin to set camps in Tutho to basically kill whoever they see, this is essentially it. So the West has this history of genocides in Africa, and they would not want to call genocides because this word is going to come out in Africa and haunt them. This is the whole question. So between April 7 and July 15, 1994, those 100 days, about 1 million people, I wanted to call it a million because it is in the Rwandese constitution, and we want to respect the Rwandese. Let's not debate their numbers. They have told us 1 million of us died. Why would you go about disputing, saying 500,000 to 800,000 Tutsis and all? The only issue I would have is to say it's the Tutsis who were killed alone, because Hutus also died.
The moderates.
The Twa also died. And in proportional to their numbers, like for example the Twa, maybe the percentage of the Twa who died might be higher than that of the Tutsi. I'm talking about the moderate Twa. Those who basically believed in the Rwandese nation. They did not believe in protect the Habyarimana. The other point one want to make is that the West complicity with the genocide, both the Western state and the Western church, particularly the Catholic establishment in Rwanda, sided with the killers in a huge way.
You have France.
And then the Western state is France. And because France and the United States are ally, the transatlantic alliance, then the United States kowtows to the whims of the French. And because of that, then, the conspiracy to conceal the genocide in Rwanda when they are recognizing the Holocaust, right? The Holocaust, if you try even a second to say there was no Holocaust, or to call it by another name other than the Holocaust, what will happen to you? You are going to get an international backlash from the West and from the Jews, which is right, because that was a Holocaust. It is the same spirit that Kagame is saying. We had a genocide here, and so many of our people were killed. Why does the West continue to differ and to sanitize, to use other names other than what it was? And therefore, Anthony Blinken and others who still want to pretend that Rwanda did not go through this, or what happened in Rwanda is not a true genocide, then we have a problem. I was working for the International Crisis Group when the killings in Sudan started. And very, very quickly, you had people started talking about the genocide in Sudan. So again, they're quick to label things genocide when they favor them. Now in Israel, there's a problem of agreeing that what is happening in Gaza is genocide, when we can see it with our eyes thanks to technology. So finally, let me say this, that the greatest thing that has happened in Rwanda, and the lesson we learned from Rwanda, is that a people working together are the united leadership, and a leadership that has nationalistic goals can really transform itself. Today, Rwanda is the fastest growing economy in Africa, and it's one of the top 10 growing economies, estimated to grow by 7.5% in 2024-2025 period, when most of the other economies, including Europe, are basically growing by 1% and so on. Rwanda has become a miracle in terms of its economy. And I think it is important, I don't believe in exceptionalism, but I think it is important to begin to look at Rwanda and give them time to build their nation, because they are coming from the depth of the worst. So to begin putting pressure on Kagame, calling him names, these are sit-tight presidents and all that kind of thing, doesn't make sense. When America needed to be stable, it did not talk about the term limits. Roosevelt ruled for how many times, Professor Mugabe?
He was elected 4 times.
He was elected 4 times. in the United States of America.
And then he died in office.
Yes, and he actually died in office. Why did he die in office? Because they were in dire problems. The recession. And he was the only person who seemed to be getting them out of recession. If the Rwandese think that Kagame need to stabilize their country, who are we to tell them something different?
Right.
Indeed, indeed. All right, unless you want to add something more, I want us just to look at also the latest development between British Prime Minister, this is Rishi Sunak, and Rwandan President, as you can see it as well, holding court here. This is Rishi Sunak and Rwandan President Paul Kagame are looking forward to the first flights under the Britain's plan to deport asylum seekers to Rwanda, departing in the spring. A readout of the meeting said on Tuesday, Sunak wants to relocate thousands of asylum seekers who arrive in Britain on small boats each year to Rwanda, but legal challenges have so far prevented anyone being sent there following a meeting between Sunak and Kagame in London. Sunak office said, quote-unquote, both looked forward to flights departing to Rwanda in the spring. Before any flight can depart, Britain's government needs to pass new legislation which Sunak hopes will pave the way for the government to send asylum seekers who arrive in Britain without permission to the East African country. Legislation that seeks to block further court challenges to the plan will next be debated in Parliament, I should say, on Monday next week, that is the 15th. Sunak has previously said he expects the first flight to leave in the spring, as I've mentioned before, over and over. So this has been also a debate there, and he was just last night holding court with Sunak on this development, but we can see it has been hitting snags here and there so far. Finally, they're not rowing back despite international courts as well weighing on this, the safety concerns about many who they say Rwanda, quote unquote, is not a safe place.
It's a tragedy for both Kagame and Rishi. Rishi is a paradox.
He's a paradox.
Yeah, he himself. His father is a Kenyan. Was born in Kenya. So you have in the British government, under the Rishi government, the ministers of Home Affairs are East African background. The two ladies, and they are the ones who are pushing this thing, get rid of these people who are not British enough. So they have this funny way of thinking. To be British, of course, it's not to be black. It's something else. And they themselves are not quite black. There's something in between. So they are busy pushing out people from Africa and say that they came by boat. And the resistance they have, very interesting, are those who might be called to be real Britons, the white. They say something is going wrong with the mind frame, the legal and moral mind frame of the British. They've committed a lot of sins, but sometimes they have some moral consciousness. And what's being done is immoral. Rishi Sunak and his ministers of Home Affairs, the ones who are trying to, really kick out people because they are not white. Let's face it. They themselves, if it was done during their parents' time, they would not be there. And in fact, I think they've admitted they will not be there. So there's something immoral about this thing. And they say they'll force their way to have a law passed because the courts have said this is immoral. Don't do it. Now, but the paradox is, why would Kagame agree to this sort of thing? That's my concern. Not so much Rishi, who is trying to be more British than the British. But
there's consideration. That will be one of the reasons as well.
Paid money? Because, there's something, we are talking about morality here, moral consciousness. Why would Kagame be a facilitator to an immorality? a political immorality. To hear of the British out of their, what they are calling their mess, and it's not all Britons, it's just a few people who came from East Africa, now in positions of power, or seeming to be in position of power, trying to get rid of Africans. There's something wrong with that. So the question is, we've just been talking about the effectiveness of Kagame, because he saved Rwanda from that. But why then would he be part of something that is really bothering conscience?
Yeah.
You're right.
You see, this is what I said earlier, Prof, about staying for too long. I've said in this forum that there is an African saying that a good dancer knows when to leave the stage. And when you stay in the stage for far too long, you spoil the dance. I think that's a challenge Kagame has gone through. He has evolved from the president who was a darling of the West yesterday to a president today who is seen as a bad boy in Western capitals. So he has reached a point where he can clutch even at the tail of a snake if it means appeasing a few powers of the West who are ready to support him. And I think this is what is at play here. That if the Americans are against him and the rest of Europe and France, if he's able to appease the British, and you keep singing Paul, Paul in London and Birmingham Palace and everywhere, so be it. Because the question is simple. Who are these people? Where do they come from? How suitable socially would they be in Rwanda economically? A tiny little country, geographically, really, with its own differences, ethnic or otherwise. And you're adding another dimension of a group the locals will start seeing as foreigners who have come to take up our... Why are we creating the levels of xenophobia in Rwanda, like the situation that we have in South Africa? For the British Prime Minister, it's a big, big paradox, as Prof says. A son of a father who went to Highway Secondary School here in Nairobi and moved to Britain to look for greener pastures. Now to turn against the same groups of people who are running away from some of the vagaries that the father ran away from is one of the greatest paradoxes of our time. Could it be explained by the psychological notion that products of persecution become very good persecutors? I don't know.
Right, leave it to that. Naomi Damba.
The ball, we don't want to label this issue. This issue is as clear as one can see it. For those of us who have spent our life understanding international relations, international law, and what governs the society where we are today. Understand what asylum seeker is about. It's a very clear definition of what asylum seeker is about. So I will say the act is illegal, immoral, and unprecedented. And therefore, what is going to happen tomorrow if there is a reverse situation when the British are now coming to Africa? Should we send them to another country first to be screened in order for them to come to Africa? I think Munene raised a very good question. What has happened to Paul Kagame? He has set a wonderful example in Africa for development. He is exceptional among our leaders. But what is this? What led to this? Is it money or is it something else? That's the question.
All right. But maybe we need to even plumb deeper and ask ourselves questions looking at what is happening globally when we're talking about nationalism, when we're talking about, you know, America first, or this country first, or that country first. Yeah. Can we talk about the fear, the morbid fear of the great replacement, right? Could this be the underlying issues that is driving this also pact at the end of the day? Because they've been raising scruples on the fact that, you know, there's a great replacement, there is a massive immigration that is coming from Africa. The population is, you know, akin to one community or one religious persuasion. And so there's this morbid fear globally that we're being replaced. We've seen what is happening also in the Nordic countries as well, with the desecration of the Quran, where the people now saying, oh, now, you know, even the Muslim community is coming to take over, you know, in our countries as well. Could this be the propelling factor? And we see it here that we're a brotherhood, a good society, that we can accommodate the asylum, but there's an underlying fear that is driving this factor, which is the great replacement. Peter Kagwanja. Let's talk about the great replacement.
Thank you. Let me first of all, add my voice to what is happening in the UK leadership vis-a-vis, you know, the rest of the world. That Britain is going through a very interesting phase where the empire is basically counter-penetrating the metropole. Because in the past, the idea was, this is what Ali Mazrui would talk about, that, you know, the empire came and penetrated the colonies. And now there's counter-penetration of the center. For Rishi to become the prime minister, it tells you how the concept of the Commonwealth is working. And there is genuinely a Commonwealth identity. Because if it is really into that level of practice, it's interesting. But we also need to recall the works of the Ugandan scholar, Mahamud Mamdani, and his famous small book called From Citizens to Refugees. Mamdani was talking about the expulsion of Asians from Uganda to the United Kingdom under Idi Amin, when Idi Amin declared the Indians are not Ugandans. And therefore, most of them fled to Kenya, and then from Kenya, they fled to the United Kingdom. And I think this is the same time that Rishi's father left this country, because there was a general feeling within East Africa. And Kenya was not very exceptional to this kind of xenophobia against our Indian population. If you recall our misbehavior during our protests, all the time you'd be invading parklands and doing all manner of things, if you remember. And therefore, there was that feeling of vulnerability by the Indian community across the board, and they went. And therefore, they were citizens here, but they went there as refugees. And they were accepted, and they settled in. So Rishi needs to rethink himself, and I think he needs a history tutor to tell him that he's sitting on the wrong end of history, and he's doing the wrong thing. But coming to what is happening in Europe generally, and I think this is what Dubal was asking. Now, we are talking about the concept of fortress Europe. Fortress Europe is you have to ensure that the empire does not penetrate the metropole. And that is a consensus with the Paris, it's a consensus in London, it's a consensus here. In the United States, it is a fear of what Samuel Huntington called the delusion of whiteness. The whiteness, meaning being Anglo-Saxon, meant you have the right to rule. The debate in America has been very funny, because it was not until Obama came onto the stage. It was about the Irish, the Mediterraneans, the Italians, the Catholics, versus now the other Americans. So it was a debate within whitedom, or whiteness, as they say. Now the Latinos are joined by the Africans, and the Africans are not just the former slaves, who are now American citizens, but migrants from the African continent, in large number, the Nigerians, the Kenyans, the Ghanaians. All these movements of population has caused a lot of worry. Why? Because it is outvoting the white community. And therefore, the question is raised as to whether America is a white man's country or it is a country of the South. And that's causing a lot of worry. So if you read the works, mostly the works that Samuel Huntington wrote towards the end of his days. And remember, we're talking about Huntington, who was a advisor to the apartheid regime in South Africa. This was a professor, one of the global professors behind apartheid system. And he was the one who was writing about, the invasion, the end of whiteness. Now, if this is the case, then what are we saying? We are saying that Rwanda and Kagame need a history tutor. They need a moral intellectual like Professor Macharia to go there and tell Kagame, if you are talking about morality of genocide and that you want to be recognized as a people who have suffered genocide, don't perpetrate white racism in regard to the question of migration and refugees. So Rwanda is not doing a favor to those Africans. It is not doing a favor to the Rwandese by adding to their population, as Dr. Bongi is saying. He's basically sitting on the wrong end of history.
All right, when you talk about morality of genocide,
yes.
Morality and genocide,
we are talking about,
do they really hang together?
No, the moral question.
The moral question. Okay, it's good to clarify.
Relating to genocide, it's saying Kagame is calling the Americans to order from a moral perspective that this was genocide, and therefore morally you are on the wrong side. And now he himself finds himself on the wrong side of.
He's also morally wrong.
He's morally wrong.
All right, we're taking a short break, but when we circle back, we want to talk about also this man, and this is Adama Dieng, and we'll tell you more on his appointment on Saturday by AU and what he will be doing. We take a short break. You're watching Global Today here at Morning Prime.